Something.
Something.
And I
More
said,
of the something. It's a test.
Oh, yes.
Couples can work together.
All right.
Out on his guard post.
Hi, young man.
Hey, how's it going?
I enjoy it.
Rob will need help.
Does he need his own paper?
No, he'll need help, so that's why you can help him.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Or I'll help you pass them
We're
out.
supposed to work on them together as a spouse.
I didn't know that.
No, go ahead.
Here, then I got you. Here.
Here's your note. I got plenty.
With your spouse.
oh, that means I gotta sit by her.
Oh, you need another one? I don't know if I have enough. I think I have plenty.
You already know the answers.
Thank you.
Morning, Morgan.
Good morning.
Test.
Thank
There's
you.
a test. Yeah.
Thank you, Maurice.
Yep. Just kind of a little fun activity to get your brain flowing this morning. If you want to be turning in your Bible to Proverbs. Yes, Linda?
Oh, I was just being silly.
You need help with one of the answers? Linda needs help with one of the answers.
Oh, no, I was just saying if it weren't for Esau, I wouldn't know what.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, on the way in here, I kind of heard another one that we've heard many times. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Yeah. I mean, heavens, you might get choked.
Is this supposed to show how old we all are in this class?
Well, I did think about that. I've had this in the file for a little while, and it may not be fair for some of the younger generation in here that haven't heard these repeated over and over, like some of us who have a few more years on them. I see Maddie looking off of her mom's list. See, the younger generation. Yeah, there's pens in the pews in front of you. If not, I have. There's lots up here. That's because people don't sit up here. Anybody need a pen? Carol, you need a pen?
Thank you, Maurice.
Nice Social Security.
Anybody else need a pen?
But then he said,
Oh, Dale, you can't look them up on the internet. Everybody watch Dale. He doesn't know the answer, so he's going to the internet already. Turn him in for academic misconduct. So if you're turning to Proverbs, about one more minute and I'll give you the answers. Then we'll dive into class. Chapter 1. see how this younger generation, Abby, does. Last one, Joe, especially for you.
Let me make a copy or two.
Nah. All right, so it's 9:35. Let me give you the answers. Most of you probably have the answers. Let me find the master sheet here. Maybe I gave the master away. Let me see that copy, Joe. You'll have to look off of Becky's.
Oh, you need that back?
I think that was my last one. The one I copied from. So if it's not broken, what's the answer? Don't fix it. It never rains, but it pours. Better late than never. It's not over until it's over. 5, yeah, it's not over until the fat lady sings. 2 answers for that one. Whether you think you can or that you can't, you are usually right. 7, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Is that true of trees too, Josh? Yeah, that's what I thought. 8, if it wasn't for bad luck, you wouldn't have any luck at all. Never mix business with pleasure. 10, can't live with them, can't without them. You can't shoot them either. H, life is like a bowl of cherries. Yeah. Cherries, not strawberries, not blueberries, cherries. 12, go ahead, punk. Make my day. It's kind of like I dare you, right? 13, 12, that was 12. Oh, it's make my day. 13, see no evil, hear no evil. 14, that which does not kill me, make you stronger, right? 15, to be or not to be? That is the question. 16, 70 and 7 years. That's biblical. 7. 17, don't count your chickens before they hatch. If you live out in the woods, it's not even good to count them after they hatch because they may not survive. Jack and Jill went up the hill. That's a pail of water. 19, I think, therefore, I am. Yeah, I don't know if everybody will get that one. 20, great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. Yeah, that one was a little tough too. Mediocre minds. You can do your own scoring. Was you asking about that last one? Was mediocre minds? Yeah. So, you know, I got to thinking as we I looked through some of these. So what really do these have to do with wisdom? Anything? Or is this just somebody playing a game? You know, if you start at the top there, I know the guys kind of relate to this one. It's not broken, don't fix it. You know, if it's working fine, don't start tinkering with it. You may break something. Every time I start on something, it seems like I start with one thing to fix, but by the time I get done, I'm fixing 2 or 3 things because something broke, especially a pipe. You know, if you're going in to do something on plumbing, it is probably going to be multiple parts. Yeah, I can't turn this up. That's up there. Well, he's turning it up a little bit. Does that help a little bit? All right. All right, so we'll start all over. The answer to the first one. No, just kidding. No, we're going to do that. But, you know, some of these maybe have nothing to do with wisdom. Some of them I think they do because, when you think about life, it kind of plays into this that you build off of your experiences and you've learned throughout the years that, and you've heard wisdom from others that, some of these things just kind of play out the way the cliche goes here. And so you can think about that, just something for fun. So in Proverbs chapter 1, we're going to start today, and then we're going to end up in Proverbs chapter 2. I'm going to start in chapter 1 because it just sets out the purpose of the book, not because Scott didn't do a great job last week. He really did. But I think it's so important that we focus on what the purpose of the book is, and we keep reminding ourselves. And obviously our topic today is on wisdom. And in chapter 2, we're going to get to the aspect of searching for wisdom. To find it. So Proverbs chapter 1 and verse 2, when it indicates that the purpose of the Proverbs is to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding, to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase in learning. A man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. To understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So there's a lot of words that appear there that we often think about when we think of wisdom. Wisdom is one of those words that we struggle with defining. It's kind of like sometimes we feel that, we know it when we experience it or see it, but to define it, it's almost like you want to use the root of the word wise in defining it. And so I struggled, I thought about this, some bit over just how do we know if we are wise? How do we know if we're acquiring wisdom? And is it kind of like humility, that if we realize that we have acquired humility, we lost it? Because if you think that you are a humble person, are you arrogant in thinking that? And so is wisdom a little bit like that, in that if we think that we are a wise person, we've lost that? Because if we think that we're wise, maybe we stop learning, or we feel like we know more than we really do. So I don't know. Any thoughts about that? How you define wisdom? And if we're going to talk about searching for it, how do you know when you get it? Right?
In my experience, I think like the wisest people that I know are pretty fast to, like I have two uncles that are super wise, like they're super smart guys. They're probably the smartest guys in my family. I come to them for everything. And I'll ask them questions about life or parenting or whatever, and they'll always give me a good answer. Then I'm like, wow, that's a really good answer. But they're really quick to be like, oh yeah, but like I've made this mistake. So they kind of like rebuke themselves right away. Like the wisest people that I know are quick to be like my uncle, maybe he's a computer engineer. You could ask him all kinds of stuff. But he'll be really fast without even thinking about it. He'll be fast. Like he doesn't come across as somebody that thinks he's wise at all. But he'll give you the smartest answer you've ever heard. And then he'll be like, by the way, like I learned that because I messed this up and this up and this up. So
yeah, and so one of the key things I think you mentioned there is the experience. They had the experience, and not just something that they went through, but they learned from it. And through that learning, hopefully they didn't repeat the same mistakes, and then they can pass that on to others like yourself or whoever we're asking wisdom from. And I think I saw this definition that I think goes right along with what you're saying there, Ryan. It's the soundness of an action or decision with regard to the application of experience knowledge, and good judgment. The ability to live life skillfully in the sense that you're using your experience. You know, a lot of times we've said the definition of wisdom is effectively using the knowledge that you have. But I think it's more than that. Because we can know something, you know, and I'm often reminding myself of something that Jeff repeats to us many times. If we, as Christians, did everything that we knew God wanted us to do, wow, what would our life be like? Versus what we choose to do out of that knowledge that we have of Him. So, if we just have knowledge and then we discern how to use it, that's only part of wisdom. In the sense that knowledge and our experiences go together with using that in good judgment to whether we act responsibly or not, or advise somebody else. You're asking how to deal with life. Do we take into account reflection on our experience, our training, our knowledge of God, and our experience then to share, to answer the question? Share.
I just was thinking, when I was younger, I always thought if you were older,
Right.
you were always wiser.
Right.
That's not necessarily the case.
Right.
sometimes, Because just because you have book smarts doesn't always mean you have common sense.
Yep.
And I think all of that needs to be together to have that experience and that wisdom.
Yeah. I mean, all of us know people that are very wise that maybe never got, you know, education beyond high school. We know some people that are maybe gray hair like myself, and maybe they're slow to give you an answer. Just because they're slow doesn't mean they're wise. We think by being a slow answer, they're contemplating their past experiences and how do I best answer this question, advice in the context. And a lot of times it is, but just because you get a slow response, I mean, one of the faculty that was in our department was a very wise man, and he was very slow to speak, but it was obvious it wasn't just because he was very slow in his speaking to you an answer, but his past experience and his compassion that he shared. And now I still have people who tell me, boy, I sat at his feet many times and I learned a lot. And he was one that was there for me when I came in 39 years ago. And so, you know, it's not just a slow to speak, but it's using that knowledge and experience in passing on good judgment. Becky.
I just think that some people are wise in different categories. Like
Yeah,
I
sure.
want to know about, I can't even say the word, the name of sheet that you have, where you can type something.
Yeah, it starts with a K.
Yeah. I'll come to you. If I want to know something about trees, I'm not going to come to you, Maurice.
That's right.
Right? So I think Josh is very wise in trees, but probably not in those sheep that you have with Josh having knowledge on that.
You're right, and we all have, and because part of that is our experience base and what our profession is or what our interests are. We do have different level of experiences to be able to be more knowledgeable and using that knowledge and discernment on different areas. So that's very true. And so when we're encountering something in life, a lot of times we need to go to those who have experienced, who have that knowledge, and recognize that that's why we're going to them, not just because they will tell us what we want to hear. If you going to somebody for them to tell you what you want to hear, you already got one person doing that. Right here, yourself. You need to hear another voice. Other thoughts? Yes?
I think there's wisdom in knowing when you don't know, or you're not equipped or qualified to advise. Because I think, like, I've got a friend and she's been seeking advice of a preacher, and it's like he's clearly out of his depth on how to handle her husband's addiction.
Yeah.
And instead of just telling her, like, hey, I'll connect you with this person, he's continuing to advise her, and it's terrible advice. And so it's like, but, like,
Oh,
unhelpful,
yeah.
and she's feeling really resentful towards that. And I think it's just like, it's her responsibility to recognize that he is out of step and isn't equipped. But I think it's also his responsibility to recognize that he's maybe ill-equipped for
Right.
that issue. And I think wisdom on his part would be connecting her
You're right.
with somebody who has the experience who can help her, instead of continuing to give her this, point of compassion and forgiveness and stuff, when really terrible things are happening. And so I think that there is a lot of wisdom in saying, I'm not equipped, and recognizing people who are, kind of like what Becky was saying. Like, maybe you think somebody is equipped to handle it and they're not, and you have to be able to discern.
Right.
They should also know themselves well enough to know, when they're maybe out of their depth.
Yeah, we would like to think that the individual that we consider to provide wise counsel will recognize and admit this is out of my league. I'm not going to be the best source, and then just be upfront with us. Unfortunately, not everyone is like that, and you provide a good example. And so that puts some responsibility onto us to recognize, they probably would be good in certain situations, but this is not sound judgment that's going to lead me to resolution or protection. And so we have to take action. So we have to be able to recognize that. Let's put well. Because if not, goes back to Becky's point, and the wise individual that we may be respecting is still very wise in certain aspects, but not everything relative to life's encounters. Yeah, that's a great point. In this first few verses of Proverbs, there's a lot of words that really stick out. I would encourage you, if you write in your Bible, to do that. I'm sorry to keep playing with this. Seems like I'm getting some echo. But words like wisdom, instruction right there on the beginning. And so when those words are translated, the root word really means for wisdom, skill. So skill, I usually think of skill as I can do a specific, in terms of working my hands, I could build something that won't be the quality many individuals in here could build, but I have the skill, I could build something. But the root word for wisdom really means skill. And so if you think about it, we have developed, gaining wisdom, we have developed the skill of using our knowledge of God and how He works with His people and works with us, and our experiences, then to be able to effectively use that in sharing with others. So wisdom is a skill, and therefore, that's why we can talk this morning about how we can search for it. The other word, instruction, is discipline. Is that right there in verse 2? To know wisdom and instruction. So if we're willing to be instructed, guided, we're willing to accept discipline. And to the point it hurts. No. It should be we're willing to accept the discipline of instruction. And that's the way of raising children, as we know. Why do we discipline them? It's a teaching, it's a guidance to help them not only now, but as they grow and mature, where they've learned those things that will protect them when they make decisions. So those two words right on the beginning is relating to a skill and willing to be disciplined by instruction. If we're not willing for that, then we're probably not going to grow in wisdom. We have to make our lives vulnerable to be instructed in order to grow in wisdom. Discernment, understanding, prudence, knowledge, hear, learning, all those words are in those first 7 verses. So think about all the things. Are we a good Do we really want to learn, or are we okay where we are? If we're okay where we are and growing in God and our knowledge of Him and what He would have us to do with our lives, we probably put that cap on wisdom. So we're not searching for it. So it's some important words there, I think, for us to underline if you're one to write it in your Bible. This aspect in Proverbs are many different messages that introduce the concept of wisdom in the format of a father's efforts to persuade his son to pursue the paths of wisdom to achieve a godly success in life. So when you see in chapter 1 and verse 8, where it says, "Hear my son," that's one of 10 my sons in Proverbs. And so it's using kind of the platform of child rearing in order for us, even as adults, to realize that we have growth that can occur. And if we really want to acquire wisdom, we have to be vulnerable and available for learning, because we haven't reached it yet. If we think we've reached it yet, wisdom, gaining further wisdom is ceased. Mary Ellen?
I've been teaching Bible classes to real little kids since I was in my 20s. And so this is my perspective, that because of the way things have progressed in the church in general, we really stress God's love. But I think I've looked at this and I've wondered how literal we can take this. Verse 7, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." And I have thought that perhaps teaching our children the first thing, to fear God, can be taken from this. Instead of stressing to little kids, yes, their mom and dad love them, and that's good. But growing up Catholic, I really learned the fear of God. And I did not want to go to hell. And that served me pretty well at bad times. You know, that kept me at times. So I'm wondering for us to think about where the balance is.
Right.
In the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. You know, reaching out with people, these days it's always about love. I think at a beginning point, it's good to fear God and not want to go to hell. That's my thought. So I don't know.
You're not going to like my answer.
Okay.
I think we need to use wisdom and knowing which direction to take in there, because you're right. I think a lot of times we want to squelch that and personify the love of God, but they're both very important. I mean, I kind of grew up in the age where you did, and it's like, you know, hellfire and brimstone almost every week from the pulpit. And I think that pushes a lot of people away. And for others, it encourages them to take stake in their life that, you know, I'm really not in control. And so for some people it works. Others, it just pushes them away. And so then, you know, if I have a young child that things are very difficult at home and they are very fearful of their parents, and I dwell on that fear, are they going to kind of compare God to these parents that are not being very loving? And so I think that's why we have to kind of use wisdom, and we do focus on a lot of God's love, because if we can comprehend the love of God and share that with children, they're going to see God personified in us. But at the same time, I think as we oftentimes do that, we fail to even have the conversation of wanting to fear God from what eternal life existence could mean. So it's using wisdom there, discerning which way in certain cases. But it's a good point. Carol.
And then another place in the Bible says, the love of God casts out fear.
Yes.
So if you really love God enough,
Yeah, but that's true, and it's very true. But I would say to you that has a very different meaning if I'm talking to a teenager about heaven and hell, and because they can't quite, put their arm around what the full nature of God is, of love, that most of us here in this room can. Because for us, if we're living in fear, we're probably not fully understanding God's love and continuing to seek that wisdom and knowing what He really does for us.
Yeah, because I still have fear at times, but then
Sure.
the love is growing, so hopefully love will overtake the fear.
Yeah, because if we live in a constant state of fear of where we're going to heaven or hell, then we've probably lost the essence of what being a child of God is, right? We've had those kind of conversations. And we need to continue to have them because we all reach those points within our life where it's like, I want to be confident, but.
I would argue it's our focus because it's the same knowledge, but it's what is your focus, heaven or hell? That same understanding of my actions, if we focus on the hell part, it becomes, I worry more like a Pharisee thing, like a checklist. You do this and you go to heaven. You do this, you go to hell, sure. But if our focus is relying on knowledge, becoming more wise, and these actions lead us to a brighter promise, I still think it's the matter of focus. I was raised by the fire person as well. Like, it was fear all the time. Like, you're going to hell. It was not you were going to heaven. Like, that will send you to hell.
Right.
Versus that same knowledge, just saying you make the opposite choice. This gets you the reward versus
Right.
the mistake.
I think that's a great point because in our focus, I think, and this is what you're saying, I would say to you it's a lot different in how we're going to orient our life if we're focusing on getting to heaven than if we're focusing on not getting to hell. Our lives are going to be different by which avenue we focus on there. Could it get us to the same place? Possibly, but your life is going to be much richer here if you're focused on getting to heaven. And we have those conversations about, it's this about being a Christian is not just the eternal award. It's the reward that we get in this life as well. And you're going to be a very miserable person if you're constantly focusing on not getting into hell. And I think that's, the key to the focus that you're talking about. Dale.
Just reading a little bit of Strong's Gospel Concordance, it shows a couple of different meanings for the word fear. One is like you're in your house and
Right.
you're opening your door, you're scared.
Right.
And the other is reverence.
It's true, yeah.
The Lord is a reverence to God.
Yep.
It's not a spirit.
Right, and that's a good point to make. We do need to make that discernment each time we talk about fear. Are we talking about fear out of respect and who He is and what He can do versus the fear that, has got a mallet over my head or, somebody's breaking in and stealing. So there is a difference, and when we read the word fear, we need to, in the Bible, we need to take it in context, but we always need to have a reverence for God that is fear. But if we focus on what His judgment will be, is different in terms of how we will probably be living our lives than if we focus on His majesty and love, because we're going to acquire those attributes of Him and how we relate to each other. Good point. Joy.
I think some of this just gets down to semantics.
Some of it does.
Because, like awful, that originally was, we are in awe, we're full of awe of God. When I learned that, I thought, this is something. Because we are in awe, but when we use the word awful, that's not good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the play on words today is different generational. And so you gotta sometimes ask the definition, and I think it's a good point. At the same time, when we say certain things, relative to what our focus is and fear or not, how is that motivating our life? That's where the key is. Are we drawing near to God? If we're not growing near to Him, we're allowing other things to distract us. And so it's like Daniel's point is, if we're focusing on reaching heaven and trying to acquire the attributes of which God allows as His creation to personify, that's going to really drive us in being compassionate, seeking out and helping those in need, spreading the gospel, because we want them to have the same thing, versus the other puts a lot of focus on ourselves and what are we doing to keep out of hell. And so some of it is semantics, but when it comes down to, you got to do a lot of self-reflection in how it's not a play on words, it's not semantics. If it's really directing my path, and that path is not drawing me, is not going toward God. That's the key question of whether it's a play on words or not. What is it doing with your direction? Maddie, sorry.
No, you're good. I was gonna say, like I can remember my really younger years aren't that far away from me. So I can remember how I felt, going to church when I was really young, and I do remember being really, really scared. Probably like a lot of us were, thinking about hell a lot of the times. And going into my 20s, I've started to like relearn how to love God. And I think shifting from seeing God as a wrathful God to seeing God as an all-loving God has been like crazy beneficial to me. And it's taken away a lot of that, like, I don't want to say religious anxiety, but like that constant like head rattling fear of hell.
And that's a really great point. I appreciate you sharing that, because there are differences in the generations and how they process and see the world and how they see living and how they cope with living. And the generation, and I'm not just describing Maddie, I'm just the generation of the younger ones now. If they encounter something that's very challenging or disturbing, the way they deal with it, they just back away. So I deal with this all the time with students. There's issues that they know are in their life, or academically, I can tell them, and then we get to the end of the semester, they did nothing about it. It wasn't that they weren't knowledgeable, but there were some issues going on that were just stopping them in their tracks. And their way to deal with it is to ignore its existence. And so Maddie makes a really good point in how her journey is, and that if we're not really careful in back to that fear versus love as we deal with each individually, we may cause them just to stop dead in their tracks and say, one, that's not the God that I think I had understood who He was, or I'm just not going to deal with that now. And so we have to keep all this thing in mind relative to who we're talking to as we share the message. Would you think that's true relative to, as you see your classmates and so forth? And
I would definitely say so, especially since I think everyone in my age group, we were all kind of like in the same, like we were all learning the same kind of classes as we were growing up. So.
Yeah, great point. Thanks for bringing that up. Well, we have probably 6 minutes to really get to the text. So, in keeping in alignment with what our deacon of education asked me to cover, let's go to chapter 2. And here's we're starting out with a second my child or my son in this text. Verse 1 says, "My son, if you will receive my sayings and treasure my commandments within you, then, therefore," proceeding from that, So again, if you mark in your Bible, I went through this morning and I have just a lot of underlining. There's so much packed in these 15 verses here. And I would encourage you to watch. There's going to be some instruction. And then beginning at about verse 7 are the promises that occur from having received this instruction. Verse 2 says, make your ear attentive to wisdom, incline your heart to understanding. For if you cry for discernment, lift your voice for understanding. If you seek her as silver and seek for her as for hidden treasures, then you will discern the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God, for the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice, and he preserves the way of his godly ones. Then you will discern righteousness and justice and equity and every good course. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will guard you. Understanding will watch over you, to deliver you from the way of evil, from the man who speaks perverse things, from those who leave the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who delight in doing evil and rejoice in the perversity of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. So that verse 12 to 15 is the protection is going to occur if we seek wisdom. Anything that kind of stick out to you in those verses as it relates to searching for wisdom?
I'm really drawn to the discernment thing.
Yeah.
Like, discernment of itself is kind of a good thing, but I think it also says to us that there are maybe wisdom from the world that we have to, like your original thing with the catchy sayings, those are cute and everything, but some of them, just as an example, like some of those, they're man's wisdom and they have some value. But sometimes we don't discern what that wisdom, it talks about like putting it into your heart, things like that. We have to really carefully search out, like, is this, God will give us the ability, I think it's what he says here, to filter out things of the world that sound catchy and wise.
Right.
But are not.
Yeah, I think the discernment is so key, and you have another word there that I think really needs to resonate with us, that we filter, because there's so much advice out there, and it goes a little bit back to what Lisa's talking about, I think, in realizing whether you're getting good advice or not. But we always have to be aware that if we're listening for something to justify our actions, we'll find it somewhere out there, and then we'll feel validated. So we have to develop this filter, which is part of discernment. That is this the godly advice that we really need? And so when I was reading this, words that I underlined is discernment there in verse 3, and understanding in that verse. It hits it again in verse 5, discern the fear of the Lord, and then discover knowledge of God. Then the promises are so reassuring when it says he stores up sound wisdom for the upright. If we're choosing the path of God, then we're choosing righteousness. And he will provide wisdom. The shield is so important because the fiery darts are always coming at us, whether it's something we see with our eyes or something we experience. And we need that shield. And we're promised that we will be protected from those if we seek wisdom. Verse 8, it will guard our path. It'll preserve us in verse 8. Then, and if we do all that, we'll have that protection, and in verse 9, we can discern righteousness and justice. Other thoughts?
Just a little bit of how much it's your responsibility to seek it out, to
Right.
that first 4 verses.
Yes, and that's something that we could certainly discuss at greater length, but often I'm reminded, as sometimes the comments made, well, you have to understand where I came from. It's true, we all come from different experiences, different backgrounds. And there is a point, though, that we have to take responsibility for our own actions. And we can learn from the past, but we can't be constantly keep using the past as an excuse. And that's part of that discernment as well, in realizing I point the fingers this way, need to be responsible for seeking wisdom, rather than blaming mom, blaming dad, blaming somebody in church. They taught me wrong, they were a poor example, whatever the negative connotation we want to apply with it, it comes back here as I'm old enough now, I've been given enough time to grow in wisdom, therefore I need to pursue it, rather than these other influences. Well, I appreciate all your comments. Everybody passed the class, and have a great week. Just seek wisdom this week.
So if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, what's the rest of that one?